That's a great intro. It is I.
Can't pretend to be someone else.
I'm excited to see this, though. I'm gonna have to duck out at half past, but Adam, do you want to just drive? Do you want me to intro? How do you want to do
Yeah,
this?
I'll just drive. Yeah. Let me see if I can get this command, to run on the first shot, which is, highly unlikely.
Some high hopes there.
uh,
In fact, if it runs in the first shot, you should not trust it in any capacity.
exactly. Yeah, so I'm gonna see because this is gonna take a while. I think I want to spawn it now. Like I want to see if I can run this analyst, that I have set up in an E2B. So that's these tiny little like Docker containers, I guess that you can spin up and have all sorts of toolkits available already on them. And I'm going to say complete as much of Advent of Code 2024 as you can. I only put one puzzle in there. And so I have it on this branch and I have it in this repo. And oh yeah, of course. Because because I'm in the wrong repository, of course. Duh.
Yeah.
All right, let's
Never
see.
happens
Is
to me.
this right, yeah. Why doesn't this have a package JSON? Oh, because it just doesn't. Let me see if this is going to, or maybe this is kicking off very quietly. That's a possibility also. Let me bring a browser in here. And I don't know if anyone's ever messed with this, this service, but so I should have, yeah, so there's a little sandbox in here and it's running and it's just kind of doing whatever it is that it might be doing. I'm a little bit of a maniac, and so I have hooked it up to your tool of choice here, right? And so it created a sandbox and it sort of launched it. And the first thing that I do is make sure that Claude's up to date, which it is. And then it says, okay, I'm supposed to I was told to do this README, so, all right. And I'm on Opus and I have some MCP servers. And so now it's going to say, I'll help you
What
start
MCPs
by
are you working with?
the only MCPs that I have in there are well, I have, Claude. I just sort of list all of their tools right when it boots
Uh-huh.
up. So this is just all of the stuff Claude just comes with. This is my own like silly MCP server, which is really just a way for it to access my own written documentation about how I like to structure repos and, my beyond lint preferences.
So
It's Go ahead.
why wouldn't you use Claude MD files for that?
That's a good question. I have used some windsurf rule files, which is like the same thing. But when I'm like personally, I'm always bouncing um from like from IDE to IDE, and I want to mess
Hmm.
with Codex also. And so I just found this was at the time the most reliable way for me to
Okay.
put things in there. And then I can
So
also put my own silliness in there, like, if you could ask the user a question, here's an ask. It just always responds with users not available. Please proceed. But I'm just curious how often it would ask.
interesting. Uh, how have you found Where are you? So you're coming at this not from a development perspective. I'm saying this with zero judgment. I'm trying to understand where you're coming from here.
Yeah.
Okay. How have you been finding Codex? And are you talking about Codex CLI or the Codex platform?
I am talking about the Codex CLI and not the
Okay. Okay.
platform.
Okay.
And
Big distinction.
I think that I'm honestly like in the process of getting it rigged up in this same like E2B setup, and
Mm-hmm.
and I don't like it as much, but maybe it's just because I've been biased towards Claude Code. Like one of the things that I was just my hot takes, like today I was just reading about how to set up its MCP servers, and it's like our MCP server setup is just like Claude's, except it's a TOML file and the key is named something different. It's like, why the fuck did you do that? But
Yeah.
okay,
That checks out. Yeah. So you have a Claude Max sub, or are you just paying by the API call?
uh, both, unfortunately. To do it in the background like this, you'd have to pay by the API call. So this is gonna,
What?
this will spit out a charge at
How,
the end.
why would you have to pay for the API call just to do it programmatically?
Now I could be wrong about this, but I thought because I'm like it's not me sitting there at the terminal that it's like I'm using it as I should just be able
You
to throw my
you can
same key
programmatically
in there.
use Claude
Yeah.
Code within your Max subscription. A lot of people
Mm-hmm.
work with like multiple work trees and they'll have like multiple terminal windows open and even like terminal managers. There's something called Claudia out there,
Mm-hmm.
and there's actually it's a very busy space right now. People trying to like put their own custom harnesses around Claude Code to better manage the
Interesting.
sessions.
I can for sure see that. I feel like
Yeah,
I have an upper limit of how much I can just keep mentally track of.
very yeah. That's really I mean that's the crux of any agentic development enterprise is like you have to these tools allow you to accelerate a lot and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes they allow you to accelerate far past your capability to keep yourself in check. That's a very common anti-pattern I've seen with developers who are freshly adopting this technology because it's very exciting to get development.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very exciting to see the speed at which things start to work. But also, like if you're not being extraordinarily deliberate and planning from the outset to make a code base that works well with AI, then you're gonna quickly find yourself at a tipping point slash critical mass of spaghetti, where there's
Mm-hmm.
just nothing to do with it, and you just got to scrap it and start again.
My analogy or the way that I think about this is like most developers are kind of the closest I can think it's like a kung fu master, but they follow a single line of thought, very disciplined, and like that's what makes a good code base is a very disciplined, sort of well paved roads all the way throughout. Whereas the models know all the techniques instead of just
Mhm.
one technique, and so they mix and match them, and so they make a spaghetti because to them it is interchangeable.
So,
Um,
so that's where the Claude MD files and the documentation references within the repo come into play for me. So the Claude MD files are great because they work in like a nested way, and so you can include them as low in the directory structure as their relevance applies. So if
mm-hmm.
you've got a module where there's specific rules around like the way that this module works and connects to other modules, you make sure that you've got a Claude MD
That
file.
file is in that folder.
Well, not just that, but you've got a Claude MD file in that folder. So I tend to have like a top layer uh, underscore doc underscore ref folder in which I keep XML formatted documentation for the entire technology stack in my project. And I have little index
Mm-hmm.
files in there that also in XML format that point to where different components of those technology stacks are noted in there. And so in the
Mm-hmm.
Claude.md files, I have it reference the index to find where it needs to pull that. So that way it can like lazy load relevant context without like eating up the context window to search for that context in the first place. And that greatly reduces context bloat and allows me to keep task chains running for longer without interruption.
Nice, nice. Let me see if I can pull a code window in here. I mean, I must have.
Yeah. So also just making sure your whole workflow is as modular as possible, because like if the less context the AI needs to be considering to make a productive change to your code base, absolutely, unequivocally, the better outcomes you're going to be getting. And if you can structure it in a way that you've got like different tasks that are in different modules, that can make sense to have like multiple work streams running at one time, where they're not gonna like actually get all up in each other's
conflict
business
with each other in the middle of doing a thing.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing that I've done with another repo that sounds a lot like what you're talking about with the you know, like I have a top level one, but I haven't put one everywhere. Is with Windsurf, at least I know you can you can put like a bunch of readme, you can put a bunch of markdown files in the .windsurf/rules directory, and then you can have these different things that are like, okay, this is always on, like this is, you know, this has to be used. And
wait, how big is that file? Want to go back to that?
This one?
The one that's always on. There's one that you noted is always on.
Yeah, this one's always on.
How many lines are we talking here? I guess it's not huge. I mean,
yep,
so this stuff is relevant to every single task?
I believe so at one time. You know, it's probably honest that that parts of this could be cleaned up. You know, but then you can say like, oh, you know, like this one's a great a lot of useful information in here. But then I think you can do like a similar thing to like embedding a Claude file in a subdirectory that you can tell Windsurf like, hey, only if it's, you know, this packages and only if it's in this subdirectory, then bring up this file and then you'll know what to do. So that's kind of that's similar to what you're talking about with Claude. I have not optimized this particular repository for Claude. I'm trying to get it to rely on reading these files, you know, like as it's coding to and deciding when to read these files.
So generally, when it's making those efforts of its own accord, it's searching wide almost every time, like at least every context window is searching wide afresh. And that search is going to lead to a lot of context rot, because also everything that it's looking at in its search for the thing that it needs, generally speaking, I guess it depends on the exact interactions of the subagents. I don't use Windsurf very often, so I can't speak authoritatively on that specifically. But in my experience with the other tools that I've used, a lot of that context rot makes its way into your outputs. And so that can be something that sort of just like misdirects it in subtle and obnoxious ways. And it's one of the reasons that people end up clearing like Claude Code sessions so frequently.
Yeah, I felt like I had read at some point that you can tell Claude Code to use subagents for certain tasks and that it will respect that. I have not, I guess I have not tried that and seen it and then observed it working really successfully for me. But if you're telling me
for the subagent workflow, you want to make sure like what you're doing is appropriate for subagents, and that like it works as like a work pattern. So you'd want a multi-layer kind of delegatable task. So say you're planning out your project and you've got it into like this series of well-contained actionable tasks, you can tell Claude Code to spin off a subagent for each of these tasks serially if they're not parallel processable. And then and you can then also specifically give it like which subagent to use. So like if you're on a little more limited subscription, you can go with Sonnet, and Sonnet is still absolutely good enough for a lot of like well-defined contained tasks, and that can like greatly expand the resources you're working with over the course of the project. But anyway, each one of those subagents that kicks off for that task is going to not pollute the main context other than to say like job done, boss. And then it'll kick off the next thing, which will be a new subagent with its own fresh context window, and then the same thing. So you really have to make sure you're setting up the dominoes well for them to be knocked down. Because if you just say use subagents, it's
not going to know when. It's probably never going to choose it.
I wouldn't say never. It can be very creative if you give it unbounded tasks. It can get very creative in how it tries to answer those, and that can be counterproductive a lot of the time.
All right, let me see. What is this done? Let me see if I can open this. All right, so I started this at the one of the reasons that, at least for me, like I'm trying to get this into something that I can analyze is I'm curious, like you, to see, like how does it overcome problems? Where does it go sideways? One of the things that I tried to do with a partner, we've been trying to do the last few days is give it just like dumps of spreadsheets, like just go to an enterprise system and dump 6 spreadsheets and tell it to do an analysis, and yeah, it takes it a lot of it doesn't do a good job. It hallucinates, it gets off track. And
how many spreadsheets are you giving it at a time?
I think we're giving it between 2 and 6 in the 3 different things that we've done.
And what model is handling these spreadsheets?
What was that question?
What's the model that's actually trying to parse the spreadsheets?
We've tried it with Sonnet and Opus, and hopefully I'll have Codex connected, soon.
I'm not 100 on how well I know spreadsheets are a little bit weird when you're parsing them with LLMs. They have different strategies for handling them, and a lot of it's like code-based and programmatic.
I found that it liked to write Python scripts and use Python to try and load up the spreadsheets. Yeah,
that is common. And that can be really problematic if the spreadsheets aren't formatted in a way that is productive for that kind of parsing, especially if they've got like empty spots in them. It can get really weird. Also, if there's any kind of like digital protection, like 365 sensitivity labeling with restrictions around that can be problematic. But the one thing that I would definitely consider, no matter which tool I was using, is I would want to process any attachments in sequence in like a separate context window, unless there was like a very specific like A to B consideration that you were making. And even then, I would try to find a way to parse them individually and then parse the outputs, because basically, maybe I overfocus on this, but to me, like the wider the context window gets, the less valuable your results. And even if you're working within a context window that technically the LLM can handle, like Claude Code, Sonnet, and Opus, they're technically rated for 200K tokens, I think. The second you get above 125, it gets funky. It gets a little bit funky, and it still might work, but it's not going to be as focused or clear as the output that you're going to be getting with a fresh context window or a context window under 120K. Likewise, like ChatGPT 4.0, the Pro version gets a 32K context window, but the Enterprise version gets a 128K context window. And let me tell you, that thing is garbage past 32K. So like you can get something to accept
Yeah.
a task and happily you know, process it, but the outputs that you're getting are, you know, widely dependent on how you're managing that context and the tool that you're managing that context with, and how that tool breaks down the information you're giving it to format it into the context it's working with.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's I think it's a very challenging problem. And go ahead.
If you're using Codex CLI, I would try
Mm-hmm.
4.1 and see how that did. 4.1 does okay with instruction following and long context windows. It ostensibly has a context window limitation up to 1 million tokens.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, just like anything else, I wouldn't trust it up to that actual million. But it has
Right.
a much wider range where it doesn't lose the plot than, or as does, I guess, Gemini 2.5. So both of those might be candidates for parsing if the other models aren't handling them well.
Yeah, I feel like, you know, there's you know, there has to be like a, well, there doesn't have to be. There's possibly, you know, like a generalized architecture, you know,
Mm-hmm.
that is just like,
Agreed.
hey, you orchestrate and hand things off to sub agents, you know. But yeah, for sure we're not at the point where you can just say, hey, here's some spreadsheets, now produce me magic, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't think that, you know, like it's that we're on the verge of just replacing the entire white collar sector
We're
tomorrow.
not even close. We're not even
You
close.
know.
Like, AI will not take anyone's job. Someone who knows how to use AI will take a lot of people's jobs.
Sure, sure, sure. Well, and you know, maybe that you know brings me to the, you know, the other piece I think we wanted to talk about at some point, which was um this N8 N8N thing.
N8N, I've heard of it.
Yeah, so and of course, you know, well, maybe this is fortunate, you know, like I had some sort of crash with it and it lost my ability to plug into or I had it plugged into a model and now that's gone. But you know, basically this is let me just, you know, I can it's a little
Yeah.
workflow tool, right?
Yeah, it's a
And
no
so I
code
can,
tool. Yep.
right? Yeah, I can press this and then I can get an HTTP request. Yeah, and so now I can come in here and I can say, do a, so I haven't messed with this, you know, all but an hour or two. I have already connected to OpenAI research message model. Okay, I don't know how familiar people are with these kind of like no code interfaces. I'm not super familiar with them. So what I did find that was cool is, you know, so if I want my code to plug into this, and then this is going to plug into this, and you know, so if I come in here, yeah, it automatically like knows what the stuff that it's going to get wired up is, and so I think that's kind of what can I ask this model to do? I can just say, hello, my name is, and I am from, you know, operation. So I just have name can be anything, and API it's whether something came in for through the API or through the button. That's really all it is. So let me execute this workflow. Of course, it has an issue. I think that you know, maybe where I wanna pause right away is like I no longer think that this is just like an average user task, you know, like, you know, like, you know, go ahead, you know, average
That,
user.
that's a very that's a very common experience where people are told that AI solves all their problems, and they're like, okay, I'll go use AI to solve all my problems. And then they get there and they're like, what now? Because it'll do a million things. There's too many ways to skin any cat with AI,
Right.
basically.
And any given, this is like, maybe this is, why I'm vacillating between these two extremes, is like, this is putting rails up for every goddamn thing, like this is total rails. And this would be a nightmare to build. I'm sorry, I'm not catching up on, I'm not up on chat. This would be like a nightmare to build like all of your workflows for your entire company. And then I started thinking about, then you start thinking about the change management process and what happens when an error happens. I mean, forget an error,
you will drown in edge cases if you try to set up your whole company around N8N workflows. Just from like the 10 minutes I've seen it here.
Right, yeah,
these things are great,
cool and slick.
Generally. Not for production.
It is cool. It is cool and slick, and I'm going to keep messing with it because I want to, I want to keep, because I want to see what it can do. Let me see if there's any.
I would love to, Manuel, I would love to hear, okay, I really like this chat. I would love to hear some of your anecdotes, Manuel.
So last year at the AI engineering conference, this dude showed me, he was working at like some kind of healthcare company. And so basically all their analysts and all their, I don't know how this is all like structured, but they had like hundreds and hundreds of N8N workflows. The interesting thing was like that the people who were good at prompting were the analysts. And so, for example, one analyst had figured out that YAML was a good intermediate format to do prompting things. But they seemed like, I don't know how they were orchestrating all of that stuff, but the dude showed me they had like huge N8N workflows to like, and this was like a year ago. So it wasn't like full on agents or so, but they were pre-AI, they were already using N8N like quite a bit. I'm pronouncing it N8N because I'm like tired of I don't know.
The secret with N8N.
Yeah, N8N, I like that.
Secret with N8N is don't use N8N when you're using N8N. Just like whatever you're doing, go to O3Pro, say, give me a workflow JSON that does this for me. So I don't have to.
Yeah, so that's what I wanted to show the dude. I was like, oh, give me the JSON, I'll generate one for you. And I was like, okay, well, the Sonnet 3.5 at the time didn't really do all too well, although you could, like build an intermediate step. But they had like huge workflows that they were using for forever, and that allowed the analysts to have like little blocks that would connect to their own APIs, and I think that was really useful for them.
Well, and that's so the move here is O3Pro. Here's my Datadog logs. They're just going to stream to you. Whenever these agents get off track, you should make an N8N workflow that's going to generate the JSON that will get them past this hump, and then you should save that as a template. So you like just recursively feed it back to the model and be stupid. That's
how do you trigger that? Like, so basically, you just
the nodes can run JavaScript, and then you can also make requests. So
there's JavaScript nodes and there's webhook nodes. Like those were like the easiest to. I had to give a workflow workshop to a dude.
Don't ask me this question. Just ask O3Pro to do it for you. Just like
O3Pro is great. Just beware of the limitations to calls if you're not paying by API.
It's
the other thing that's cool is that you have all these like influencers doing N8N things, and you can just like screenshot their setups, which some of them are really useful, like their LinkedIn scrapers or whatever. And it just saves a lot of time to be like, okay, someone has already done this, put it in. But I can't deal with like graphical interfaces. It just,
For me, anytime I'm trying to make a graphical interface work, I run into something that a graphical interface can't handle, that I need to dig into the CLI, and it has just permanently turned me off of GUIs.
Yeah, don't use the GUI. I don't use the GUI. Like it's only
YAML
JSON. Like the reason, the reason you use it is because it's a structured data format that's really hard for a model to mess up. it automatically gives you the rails, and you can ask it to generate more rails for itself, and it's
I
not
think
going
you
to
just
mess
sold me
up.
on N8N or N8N,
Yeah.
as we're calling it now, I guess.
Yeah. So yeah, the thing with GUI, with lots of applications, but like, you know, applications like N8N is like, stop trying to use them. Like, make the model do everything. Stop trying to be smart. Like, don't try to fix it. The model's smarter than you. Just figure out how to get the model to fix itself.
Yeah, and
Like,
just be
be
careful to
dumber
context
is the
engineering when
moral
you're
of the
doing
story.
that.
Yeah. Or at least that's how I operate these days. It's
I
like
mean, that
anything.
makes perfect sense to me. I like it. It sounds like
And
a
like,
solid workflow.
because you already have the Datadog like tracking everything, like getting a feedback loop of Datadog that is tracking that, and then those agents are generating workflows that are going back into the Datadog that are flagging specific things that are going back into the workflow that the agents are then watching, et cetera, et cetera. So you get these little recursive self-improvement loops, and it's not this grand AGI thing. It's just like one little loop that works for me, and you just shove those in everywhere.
How do you avoid overfitting in those scenarios? I guess if it's not giving you, if it's not throwing an error, it
Yeah,
wouldn't
I mean, you
cause it to
review it.
adjust.
Yeah, well, yeah, like, so you review it, but like N8N is kind of how you avoid the overfitting. Like, you give it these really structured places to play and just let it play. Is kind of the thing.
Okay. Cool. Thank you very much for sharing that.
Yeah, I feel like I'm not using it enough, but like from a philosophy perspective, every time, so like my thing that I end up doing is like, when I'm thinking about like these sort of AI first workflows, is like I start over engineering them. I'm like, oh, the model's messing up, so I have to step in. Like, no, I need to like stop myself from doing that. Like, there's a way to get the model to step in on itself. I just have to find that and give it that.
Interesting. Well, it's not the model, it's a model of your choosing for that workflow, that being O3, because
Yeah,
not, you know,
sometimes it's like ensemble or like, yeah, so if there's a thing that just a straight up call to one model is not going to work, well, the answer to that is like, call multiple models, have them debate, then ensemble that into the ultimate deliverable. So it's always like, ship it back to the model. Like, if the model can't handle the model, then get the model to prompt the model. Because I'm not going to try to figure out how to prompt the model to get the thing.
sounds like you could
You know
throw a
what's
model
fun?
router workflow in.
Well, you could throw an N8N workflow,
What's
model nodes.
What's funny is when we something we've observed just in this experimentation with throwing spreadsheets and readmes at E2B, you know, my numeral, we ran out of just letter acronyms, didn't we? Damn it. You know, when just throwing things at E2B, is that when we wrote the README, it did not perform as well as when we wrote the README and then asked the model to rewrite the README.
They're better at prompting themselves than we are. Like,
But
the Anthropic console bench is really, really good for this.
I would say there's like a sliver above where they're at, where I've seen, I wouldn't consider myself to be talented enough with context engineering to improve over O3Pro's outputs, but I have seen people who get an output from something like O3Pro, and then they just go in and they start removing tokens as superfluous. And I there's a science to it that I cannot grok yet. I'm trying to figure it out, but
No, the models are great at that science.
yeah, the models will get you very far, I guess is the point.
Yeah, that basically is, and it's like, yeah, like, or like, I think there's some principally papers that like show this, like the models are better at prompting themselves than we are. Like, we might have like an edge sliver, but end of the day, like, that's human stuff. What the thing that you want is to add that little sliver into the search space that the model is looking for to reconfigure this prompt into like the optimal sort of directive for the other model.
Yeah, makes sense.
Reality is a search problem. Change my mind.
That's all I had. You know, I'm happy to answer the questions. I'm happy to hack at something. You know,
what's something that you can't get the model to do with N8N right now? Or like what's an N8N thing what's the thing where you're like,
Oh,
it doesn't work for this?
I'm too early. You know,
Okay.
I'm still like getting my footing, to be fair, you know.
Well, yeah. So what I or like so 6 spreadsheets was something that I heard doesn't work. You go to O3Pro, say, hey, I have these 6 spreadsheets, and I also have N8N that can also like stop to call a model, just so you know. Can you give me a workflow that is going to correctly ensemble the models such that they can actually parse the spreadsheets? Here is the original spreadsheets, and then here are the spreadsheet output that I didn't like. So avoid this, and then I'm going to give you a description of the kind that I like, and then you just think on it and figure it out.
So yes, but O3Pro still has the 128K context window, and so depending on those spreadsheets, he could be operating outside of that.
Yeah, so it's gonna truncate it, but what it should figure out while it's trying to make that workflow is that it needs to create sub spreadsheets and send those off to different models.
Yeah, so I might workshop that with, I might workshop your O3Pro prompt with like O3 before you submit it to O3Pro.
Yeah, and like I might put that in a workflow that says like, hey, like check this pro, you know, or like I might expect that O3 might find out that, oh, like when I am creating this prompt of these 3 spreadsheets, then I should have a model recheck this outgoing spreadsheet / prompt kind of thing that I'm sending during this workflow sort of thing. But you need to be able to iteratively prompt it. So you kind of like need like a deep researchy workflow, which you can build with N8N. You can sort of, you know, you can, since you have the model node and you have the JS node, like you have all the tools you would normally have if you're a JS developer. You just also have this like JSON based Rails primitive to build it off of, kind of thing.
I really like the way that you put that. So you could build in quality gates then to each step of the workflow, where if XYZ not met, and that could be XYZ as determined by a model, do not proceed or loop back.
Yeah, and like stream the Datadog logs of the other models, and then have an ensemble of models constantly debating if the Claude code prompts need to be changed or intervened or whatever, and then like have something text you when you need to, like when it actually needs a human.
So I guess step 1 would be setting cost limits.
Well, yes. Yeah. So the place I want to go with this is because flagship models are going to be, the thing with flagship models is they're powerful, but they're out of the box solutions. So if I have my collection of Datadog logs and my collection of N8N workflows, and I have like Kimi K2 or DeepSeek R1, then I can like RL my internal model to be better at specifically handling my Datadog and my N8N.
I love that. I love that. That makes all the sense.
You guys here, it's just in pieces. Like you gotta put it together.
I guess I'm gonna try an N8N at this point.
And like anything works. You can use like Composio, or you can use Make, or kind of whatever. It's just like anything that sort of like constrains it. I think like the way Manuel approaches it is he just goes straight raw code, and he's like, make me some DSLs and then flip around the words in the DSLs kind of situation. I just use N8N just because it's easy to self-host, and I have a Coolify one-click on it, but it works with pretty much whatever.
That's cool. That's cool.
Like it's not that you necessarily need to use N8N either, but this graphical representation of flows is really interesting. I need to dig in more, but what I've been doing when using sub-agents, so I use M-Code, but I guess Claude Code is the same. I will ask it to design a diagram of how to parallelize subtasks, and so basically do workflows. And I use PlantUML because it's actually, I think, better suited for it. I ask it to output a PlantUML diagram and then use that as an instruction, right? And it's like, it allows to keep the model much more. PlantUML.
PlantUML.
Yeah, like the old days. I think leaving behind UML and all of that, the first one, yeah. It's like Mermaid, but like more tailored to software engineering. So if you
Okay.
go look at if you go look at activity diagram, that's like the ones I usually use. See that? Scroll down a little bit. Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah, they use ads. Don't click it. It's an ad. So if you scroll down, they have these like syntax down here, and that allows you
See.
to define like it's a well-known notation that's been around for like 20 years. And but it doesn't really matter per se. It's more like because it's a DSL/syntax to define control flows, it's a really effective prompting technique compared to, you know, even markdown to-do lists, because this will per default like encapsulate like parallelism. Let me see if I can share my screen, because it will become much more evident if I show what I mean with it. Let me see, I'm on my Mac, so I'm not really used to how to do these things. Let me see. So this might be a little bit too big. There we go. Is that readable?
Yep.
So let's say we have a big mess of a code base with lots of garbage. I want to refactor it so that we first define a plan, like an architecture spec, then review it, go back if it's bad, then start implementing a prototype. Then based on the prototype, launch a series of parallel agents in their own work tree to refactor the actual code base. I don't know. Output flow diagram as PlantUML. I'm going to switch away from O3, but I would usually do this in O3. You know, with like the actual code base, not like the prompt garbage code base.
How much of the code base would you use?
Whatever the agent decides is necessary. Right?
You trust this a lot.
The goal is to trust it a lot, right? Like, I don't want to verify. I want
to
I want to see how far I can push this kind of stuff. And I mean, this is like upfront work to tell it where to look. So it's not too bad, right? But really my idea is like, okay, how much can I do, you know, like on auto, so that I remove myself from the process, right? And so this would be like a pretty clean way of architecting something, right? Where you have like, maybe this is a sub agent that does the review, then you implement the prototype, you do this, and then you spawn the parallel refactors. So don't do this in Sonnet, at least not the heavily neutered Sonnet, because that's a recipe for disaster. And then I don't have an agent on here, but I don't know how we could do this, simulate that. Simulate a run through with agents as if you were a coding agent with sub-agent tools. I don't know, but this is a really effective prompting technique versus, you know, the more like text-oriented way of doing things. So I recommend trying it out, because you can use it not just for coding, but for anything that's like a workflow and an agent, instead of describing it in text, which is like ish. If you use code to describe it, it will like prompt it too hard to write code. But I found this like intermediate diagram technique pretty good to prompt sub agents.
So I've put a memory in my ChatGPT subscription so that whenever it thinks to output code, that unless I was specifically asking for code, it should default to pseudocode. And I found that to be very productive.
Yeah. So I've been playing around with these different things. I have something that's really interesting that I'm going to show as well, because it might give people some ideas. I've been playing around with these like prompting techniques that are like kind of world changing. Like use tmux was a big one, where it would always struggle running like servers in the background and tailing their logs and like closing them properly. And, you know, it would like run a server, but then not be able to kill it and would kill other processes. So just using tmux was like a pretty good way to solve that. And then I think for agents, what I think would be really interesting, and I haven't really tried it out yet. Let me see if I can find it. man, I generate way too much stuff in Manus. Is using Redis CLI to both synchronize and also communicate sub-agents with each other, right? Because they can store data, but they can also subscribe to event queues so that sub-agents are able to communicate saying like, I've done this and I've modified this file, and then other agents can just pull them. So I had them create like a JavaScript sandbox and also a set of, so there's low-level primitives for Redis, right? Which are cool, but they're like a little bit brittle. And then on top of those, I built a whole set of basically agent coordination things. So this is the low-level stuff, but then agents can do this. And I'm really curious to see if you give the agents basically the command line tools to do this, or the JavaScript methods to do this, like how much they can start communicating, because they know what communication between agents looks like, right? Like there's enough of that in the training corpus to say, well, I'm going to wait on this agent to have finished refactoring the email stuff before I move on. And then they call a blocking tool and wait until the email agent says like, I'm done. So I haven't played with this too much, but
do you have agents like hot loaded and ready to fire off, or do you like spin them up for each one?
So I have a MCP that's just like executing JavaScript, but I haven't tried it out yet. Like this is just an idea that I'm playing with. I tried to give it like shell scripts and say like, call Redis CLI to synchronize. And that worked in some instances. And it was really cool to see them like call the same pub sub and say like, oh, well, it looks like this agent hasn't finished, so I'm going to wait.
I went through a similar attempt to automate Claude code with this before hooks were a thing, and it was a bit of a nightmare in my experience. But I mean, I'm sure there are better ways to do it now, and I feel like a lot of the stuff being developed is good.
It wasn't robust enough, but one thing that we can try is if we take this and go back to our diagram, right? Like if we rewind to here and then now use annotate with these APIs to show how to communicate amongst agents and add it to the flow diagram. I don't know, this is horrible prompting, but this kind of stuff seems to work pretty well. Yeah, depending on, right? Like I want to find the structures that make prompting not
making it up on the spot is too hard. Too much pressure.
Get a model to do it.
So here you can see that they do, right? Like once you prompt them with this in the graph, I think it's going to be really robust. Yeah, I'm gonna play more with it. I like destroyed my JavaScript MCP.
When's the stream that you're gonna mess with this one on? I gotta make sure I'm.
I think next week maybe.
Oh yeah, good shit.
Anyway, that's what I wanted to show. Hopefully that gives like people some ideas, and because I'm curious to see. I think there's so much untapped stuff in agents to actually build big code bases that don't slopify, right? Because like refactoring a big code base is even more pattern matching than like building new features in a way.
Have you done anything with like graph databases for like code base management, where it sort of like summarizes and internalizes that stuff to a graph database for prompting and pulling like lazy loaded sections of it?
I have a little bit by using this. I don't know how much I've shared in AI in action, but I've been doing this like JavaScript based thing where just like in JavaScript you have SQLite. So that gives the model the option to store things, but also create JavaScript function as needed. And I told it like, oh, model the code base. And that's all I prompted it. I just said like, you know, you have a database, you have JavaScript, like please model the database. And it did a graph database kind of like, right? Like it would start analyzing the files. So I added a tree sitter library into my JavaScript sandbox and it started using that. Like it's pretty crazy because that's what I meant with like, I have zero prompt effort to do. Like the only thing I need to do is say like, write the code. If you don't put write the code, it will like not do it. So it's really weird. It's like model the database. By the way, you can write code, and then it will do like, it will like come up with a pretty good graph database on the spot, and I don't need to worry about it.
Do you have a repo with an example of that?
Yeah, it's called Jesus. I said, I think it's broken right now. I'm not fully sure.
Is that what it's called? Jesus? That's what you shout at the computer screen?
No, because it's JavaScript.
Okay.
Right, like the GS. It used to be called Experiments.js web server, but that's kind of so this is, it has like a full REPL and like all kinds of crazy stuff. This is like a little bit too over-vibed, I think. But the other thing that I have is this Go-Go-Goja. So it's all Go with a JavaScript thing. And so I cleaned up all my module engine, and I'm starting to add more and more modules in there. So currently those are very, very simple, but in my big vibes mess repo. So this is all stuff built completely autonomously by Manus. Like this is code I don't even understand or look at. But I have like an LSP interface that seems to work. I have a tree sitter interface that works, and then I have a text apply interface that works as well. So those I'm going to merge them because LSP is really cool. Like it's really cool to be in JavaScript and say like, oh, where's the symbol used, and then it like kind of does it. And I wrote zero code for it. Anyway, I'm really curious to see where all of this goes.
Why I'm or like why I want to so much to play with, so little time.
Yep.
Yeah, so in NeoVim, if you use mcphub.nvim, you can make a native Lua MCP server that has access to the NeoVim API, such that you can use things like Telescope and Trouble to like let the model just drive NeoVim and bounce around between all the symbols and grab LSP outputs and all that. You know, I'm not good at NeoVim. Just let the model do it. Like.
What's really funny, it's like pretty token inefficient, but if you give, I tried a little bit, if you give the model tmux and then you say like run vim and write macros, it will start using tmux to write macros to refactor the file. It's like really funny.
Yeah.
And then it will read it back and forth. So it's a little bit slow, right? Because it like calls the shell tools all the freaking time, but it's really funny to see it just like know what to do.
Well, yeah, and that's why the Lua MCP is really intriguing to me, because it's just gonna tool call to drive it, and you're hitting Vim.
What models are you guys working with that are using these MCPs effectively?
Opus 4 tends to be the one that I usually default to. I think, or like. What I want to find an open source solution for that, because I think Gorilla can do it, because it can do it for open API. So why can't it do it for MCP? But yeah, Claude 4 seems to be the guy, at least when it comes to tool calling. And then if Claude needs a model for something else, just give it a tool where it can call O3 if it gets confused or whatever.
Yeah, I've been having a really good time. I've been getting better results than I expected by having Claude Code call other models like Gemini for components of the workflow.
Absolutely.
Like Gemini's got that 1 million token context window, and so when there's like a deep analysis that I want to kick off in the middle of a component, but like Claude's got that 200K limitation, I have it called Gemini 2.5 Pro. And
the trick there, Gemini has really good throughput on its recall, but when its context window is full, its reasoning degrades fairly quickly. So what you want to do is have Gemini pull out all of the information and make a new document that Claude can then read down and do reasoning about.
That's exactly the workflow. Because Gemini is great for summarizing and like analyzing, but I haven't found
How
it
do you
to be as good as advertised on code.
how do you have Claude Code called Gemini? You have an MCP for that, or like how do you do it?
You use a code with the API hook. You use a
Gotcha.
so it depends on your workflow, frankly. But yeah, using the hooks, or you structure the.
So
At
Sorry?
the moment, the one
I'm curious. I'm curious if you were willing to try out something for me, because I use M code and I don't have time to I don't want to go into M code, but try this the same approach out, which is to have, if you start having like a refactoring plan like this one, also ask it to create the necessary hooks to do it. So you can say like, oh, every time you do this kind of thing, review with Gemini and XYZ. So basically speaking out loud what you just said, then it generates this mermaid diagram with, this like pretty strong calls and maybe the hooks as well. The thing I'm gonna have to bounce, but the thing I'm trying to YOLO refactor right now, right? Like I took a huge code base and I was like, make this event driven. Like that went completely sideways.
I like what you're thinking. I'm not 100% sure I got it, but definitely I'm gonna ping you when I have the time to actually explore that idea. Who are you in the Discord?
I'm Slono.
Slono.
And what are your handles, Adam and all right. Yeah, cool. I got a bounce, but that's currently my big thing for the last 2 weeks was like, can I YOLO refactor? Can I like YOLO big code bases? Because in my head, it's very simple, right? I'm gonna be like, oh, this needs to be event driven, and I don't want to prompt more than that. It should be able to come up with a good architecture to do that, because it can. If I ask O3, it's gonna give me something that's pretty decent. It's just like applying that to the code base, which is also very tedious, kind of ad hoc. Like it's always the same stuff. It doesn't seem to be able to do it, but it feels eminently possible to do that part, right? It's like models are made to do this. And it's just the way we currently.
Yeah, you want like a patch-based or diff-based workflow, or like rather like I'm where I'm heading with it is I think it's going to be patches where
yes.
like
I think it's going to be like the ad hoc creation of the tools that you need to do the thing that you need to do, right? Because you need to adapt to certain systems where if you want to refactor, you need to find the right granularity to make sure you're not breaking everything, but also to not make it small enough that you actually never progress. Because the pattern I've seen is that Claude will start refactoring, right? Like I've got a really good plan in O3. I give it to Encode, which is Sonnet, and then Sonnet at some point will get like a lint error saying like, oh, well, this symbol that you're refactoring away is broken. So I'll be like, oh shit, the symbol's broken. I'm going to write a wrapper. And then so it starts wrapping the stuff that actually needs to be removed. And then it starts removing the wrapper and says like, oh shit, the wrapper is gone. Let me create, and then some kind of like architecture astronaut pattern where it's going to be like, I'm going to make a mock interface wrapper, and then just like explodes from there.
Do you have like prompts against anti-patterns like that? Like if you're telling it not to go too hard?
And I think either it's M code, either it's the model as well. Like it seems hard to fight against Sonnet's training already. But I think something about the agentic part of it also makes it much more easy to forget to do that. So I'm experimenting, but my trivial approaches were it's context load plays into it, although M code is pretty good at that. It doesn't feel like context bloat errors. It feels like, oh, I found something wrong and I reacted upon it, which makes sense when you greenfield, right? Like when you greenfield, you want to avoid having errors too early. But when you refactor, you actually want to have errors early until like everything resolves, kind of. So it's an interesting balance. I have to bounce. I'm sorry. We can talk about it.
Okay. Yeah. I definitely. What was your Discord?
Slono.
My suspicion here is that I am once again trying to over-engineer. I'm suspecting that like periodic injections of like no, do it again might be like kind of enough to just.
Not in my experience. Not in you guys obviously have different experiences
than I do. Right? That's always the thing.
That's interesting.
If it's got a context management tool, then it's like, oh, okay, well, let me do some reasoning. Like, oh, why is the user indicating that this is wrong? Let me reason about what this agent is doing. So now I need to look at its context window, and then I'm going to need to reconfigure that context window in order for it to actually accomplish the goal. So if I just sort of periodically inject that when there's like there's one error, then there's the same error, then there's the original error again, like detect that, and then like, no, you're doing it wrong. You need to go back and figure it out. Is like at least one of the components of the waterfall that is in there. But I'm always like, how can I make this dumber? It's kind of the directive in my experience.
Yeah, I mean that's the goal, right? Is to make it keep it simple, ideally. But I feel like agents put us in a really weird spot where, depending on how they interpret our simple commands, it can get pretty complicated pretty quick.
Mm-hmm. I'm the other direction I'm kind of heading is like functional programming and property testing, because if I can just take a PRD that defines properties of the software, then I can just fuzz it out.
That's what I'm doing.
Yep, there you go.
That's what I've been doing.
I gotta get O3 to learn Erlang. I was gonna say I need to learn Erlang, but no, I don't. So
yeah, dude. I've been having a lot of good results by just getting it broken out into like PRDs for each feature.
Oh yeah,
and like linked PRDs, and that's where I get like the lazy loading of like the edges of each module and how they interconnect, so I can keep it from getting too much context around the whole project while it's focusing on any component. But that's not for like a new refactor of an existing code base. That's just for like the planning of
you just all you need to do is generate a PRD that currently describes that code base, and then you can say, okay, like now
yes, but that's not a simple it's a little bit more complicated when you're working on an existing base, because you got to do that like layered agentic review of each subcomponent, and if it's not already modularized, that gets fun.
Yeah, it's definitely a task. But yeah, I think like the fundamental primitive of like big list and then smaller to-do list, Claude's has one. Like the little tools like think and like Scratchpad are like way more important than we think than one thing.
Well, think is dangerous, because if you don't actually have much already in the context window loaded, like Anthropic themselves will say, don't use think, don't use think hard, don't use ultra think, unless you've got.
I made my own MCP server that is called think. And what it does is it runs from the paper algorithm of thoughts. It's like choose an algorithm, run it down once, and then review it.
Can you link that? That sounds fascinating. I'd be very interested in that. I've tried the sequential thinking MCP.
Yeah,
it's not much better than a checklist that Opus generates itself, in my experience.
I'll see if I might be broken right now, but it is.
I mean, you know what?
I put it in AI in Accent. It's MCP Reasoner is what it's called. But I think it's got like 5 algorithms in there. So the idea is like, okay, sequentially think in this way, and then like evaluate, like, will you get to the solution here? If not, choose a different algorithm and run that. Oh, you muted again. But I think we're.
Thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate this. This is really cool. Broken or not, I'm still going to check it out. It'll still end up being productive somehow, I'm sure. I really appreciate this whole talk. It's been very informative for me. I appreciate the counterpoints to my experience. It's been very productive. So yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I'm curious to see if anything like unblocks or changes for you. So yeah, keep dropping in the
Oh, I will. Yeah, we'll be in touch. Don't worry about that.
Absolutely, for sure.
All right, I gotta go. Thanks everybody. I'll catch you later.